Good morning. Would you please pray with me and for me? Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity again to come together as a people in your name as we worship you and ask for your lead and guidance in all that we say, do, and hear everywhere. Please let my words reflect your goodness and truth, and may everyone present be reminded that they are welcomed and loved unconditionally. And please remind us that in every day and in every way, you are the fount of every blessing in our lives. Amen. Now, you may have gathered from the title of my homily and the fact that this is World Communion Sunday that I'll be talking a bit about diversity. That's a subject that is quite timely now, as it has been many times in the past, and is probably even so because this is an election year, but also because the United States is a decidedly diverse nation, at least in terms of ethnicity and culture. And so the world is, as most of us learn through our elementary social studies and on through high school, television, movies, and now the internet. For some, it is an interesting point of observation and discussion. For others, it is a point of irritation and even resentment. And that brings me back to the title, Who Made the Salad? The salad bowl being one of the two more common metaphors for the American diversity that we know, the other being the melting pot. And each of those metaphors has advantages and disadvantages, but one I truly believe wins out. And granted, both may at times be oversimplified and even considered naive as a way of looking at things, but there too lays an advantage. One of the reasons Jesus, for example, used parables and metaphors was to make concepts more readily identifiable by simplifying them. When I was a kid, I was always getting into one kind of trouble or another. I used to joke that one of my dad's nicknames for me was, "Okay, what are you monkeying with now?" I was very curious about mechanical things and would often take my toys apart. I sometimes took things apart that I had no business taking apart, but I wanted to know what they looked like inside, and I wanted to know how they worked. And unfortunately, I wasn't quite as thrilled about putting them back together again. I also like to melt things, plastic things, wax things, butter. I just thought it was fascinating to hold a candle up over an open flame and watch the colorful wax drip, 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 usually all over the place. I'm sure my folks were more worried at that time that I was a budding pyromaniac, but I really just loved to watch things melt. Which led me, when I was about 10 or 11, to making my own homemade candles. First, out of simple, colorless paraffin and a bit of sturdy thread that I would wax and wrap around a pencil inside to hang down into a Dixie cup. I'm sure a lot of you did the same thing. And then I discovered that I could make more colorful candles by melting whole crayons into the wax. I would sometimes layer different colors in the same cup, and some of them came out pretty nice. I then realized that if I melted a blue crayon and a yellow crayon, I could make green, and with red and blue, I could make purple. And experimenting, I came up with more and more different colors. Some, again, pretty nice, but I also noticed that when I would think about how neat it would be to melt several different colors together, the end result would invariably be some muddy shade of brown or dark grayish purple. Those colors, instead of creating more interesting shades, all tended to melt down into the same muddy-looking, indistinguishable blob of dark dullness, which is kind of what it is with the melting pot theory of diversity. On one hand, it sounds not only plausible, but sometimes a good thing to think of America as a big melting pot where all kinds of people, different ethnicities from different countries, all melt down and become America. And after so many hundred years, first as colonies and later as the United States of America, we began, to some extent, at least to become a cohesive, collective group of citizens and residents that we call Americans. And in a realistic sense, many Americans have descended from many different countries that sometimes we will refer to ourselves as Heinz 57 varieties or just not give much thought to what our ethnic background is. And there's even a decided advantage in that. For one, America may have a great deal of diversity within its borders, but we're hardly the only country in the world where citizens hail from different countries or even different continents. And for another, the sense of being American, of having that identity, is a very good thing. But that good thing seems to get muddied the more we cling too closely to the melting pot idea and forget that we are a country of individuals. and individuals whose forebears have been here for hundreds of years, or in the case of Native Americans, thousands. Or we may be the first generation, having come here as immigrants ourselves. The point being that we are still an evolving and changing nation, and still one where both indigenous native people as well as more recent immigrants exist. The problem being then in forgetting the value of that and becoming uncomfortable with that difference, and even xenophobic and hostile. And of course, ethnicity and national origin are not the only ways in which we differ. There really are so many. We differ culturally in so many ways. We may not have a nation that is multilingual, but there are regional differences even in the English that we speak. We have a diversity of politics and political views, and we are lately even painfully aware of how vast and distant some of those differences can be at times. We have different beliefs. Our neighbors, near or far, may be Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Baha'i, Hindu, Shinto, pagan, no belief at all. It really is quite a long list. We are different genders, male, female, transgender, and there are even further breakdowns just as those differences are in sexual orientation and cultural expressions of all of those. In fact, the more we truly study human beings, the more we are likely to find that we differ in so many more ways than we realize. And I think that is good. Not everybody does, but not everybody believes that many differences are natural or even real for that matter, that they're structured. But therein lies one more way in which we are different too. So when you look back at the melting pot idea, it isn't that I, for one, believe that it is a completely poor one or without merit, but just as my melting 7 or 8 different colors or crayons resulted in a muddy-looking and frankly rather boring mass of dull sameness, our clinging too firmly to the melting pot idea of diversity can result in, if not a muddy sameness, then a basis for fearing, at least being uncomfortable with difference. It makes us become too enamored of the idea that to be an American, one has to be a cookie-cutter duplicate in so many ways, just like everybody else. I admit I'm perhaps focusing a bit too much on the idea of American diversity, but in doing so, I think it is just as an example of where diversity thinking has gone wrong at times, and where it can excel and result in a better world, too. So much of what I'm talking about extends past our borders, and in so many countries, there are racial, ethnic, and cultural divisions of long standing, and sometimes with dreadfully tragic consequences. People do have a tendency to fear change and fear the unknown, but that's not God's plan for us, nor what Jesus taught. 1 John 4:18 says, "There is no fear in love." But perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. In other words, fear and real love cannot exist in the same place at the same time. And of course, there are many who would say, well, I love you, but I cannot interact with you because you're Muslim. Or I love you but I cannot interact with you because you are lesbian or gay. Or I love you, so I won't judge you because you have a prison record, because only God can do that. Sometimes we think this same way about all of the people in the Bible, that God's people are just one long, homogeneous line of people that were once Jewish and then became Christian. So we'll call them collectively Judeo-Christian. We don't realize often how diverse the stories, the people, the various ethnic and religious groups in the Bible truly were. As Christians, we sometimes shudder at the thought of the mention of the word holy. Yeah, we're Christians and we're called to lead holy lives, but hey, let's not get carried away with it. I can't be good all the time. But the term holiness is something that is often misunderstood. It doesn't mean walking around singing Gregorian chants and wearing sackcloth, but it does mean to be identified with God and set our lives aside as different than the world. Not being little goody two-shoes and better than everybody else, but letting our lights shine so that others know that the Jesus that came to the world and came to this world so that whosoever, that is a beautiful word, whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting light. And yes, that's a better way than the world provides. But nowhere does he ask us to stop being individuals. Yes, we are Christian, and they, meaning the world, shall know we are Christians by our love. But we are also a diverse group of people from all walks of life, from every continent, and we are a myriad of personality types, physical and emotional characteristics. God indeed made a rainbow of Crayola crayons, but not with the intention of melting all of them down into one blob. No, he is the master salad chef. Now, who here doesn't love a good salad bar? One where there are so many choices that it's hard to make up your mind. Colorful, varying textures, tastes, shapes, and unless you're making it in a food factory, nobody really ever makes a salad the same way every time. Now, at a salad bar, we may have our favorites, but people mix it up to varying degrees. So not only the salad bar itself, but our individual salad plates are often bowls that are colorful collections of different but easily identifiable bits of yumminess. Salad bars are celebrations of nature's bounty, of God's creation. And yes, there may be things on the salad bar that you don't like at all or don't like as much as some other things. But there are more than likely things that you enjoy and things that you're positively crazy about. A really good salad can be a meal in itself. And so it is with God's people. There may be some that you don't like at all or don't like as much as others, but they're God's creation, and you don't have to like them to love them. And hopefully there are people that you like a lot and some that you're positively crazy about. But we're all still equally made and owned by a God who loves us. In the literal, that is, in the edible salad bar, there are probably things that you didn't like as a kid, but your mother made you eat them because they were good for you, and you knew it. So you probably did eat those things, and maybe over time you grew to like them a bit because you grew up and tastes change and you understood that green vegetables are a good source of vitamin A and vitamin K, etc., etc. Or you simply decided that because you're an adult now you don't have to eat them, you can just skip them. But why now do we have such a hard time doing this with each other? Why do we look at people we fear, people who are different, and then shun them, or at least tell them, no, go away until you can become exactly like me? We are so afraid to leave our safe, comfortable hidey holes at the coffee hour, for example. It's okay to want familiar faces by us, but sometimes we need to mix it up a bit. How else can we find people that we might be completely crazy about? That's one way we can love one another each Sunday after church. Honestly, though, I think we do a good job of it for the most part, but in general, we ought to sample more items on the salad bar every now and then, or sit in a different place in the sanctuary each Sunday. One of the Bible stories that explains how we are to love one another in the face of difference is clearly in the lesson of the Good Samaritan. As you may recall, there was a man lying injured on the side of the road. He was a Jew who had come from Jerusalem and was headed to Jericho, a long, long walk over difficult terrain. He was attacked, robbed, and beaten up with his clothing torn to shreds. A priest came along but walked to the other side of the road, avoiding the injured man. And then along came a Levite, a man who was used to assisting others, but he approached the injured man and then walked past him, though he could clearly see that he was dying and would die if he did not receive aid. But then along came a Samaritan. Samaritans and Jews did not treat one another very well and typically would not even think of helping one another. They were different, social and political opposites, and given how poorly the Samaritans were treated by the Jews, the Samaritan was probably the last one expected to help his enemy. But he did. And he did so with compassion, nursing his wounds and carrying him to a hotel on his donkey. The Samaritan paid his bill at the hotel and said, "I'll return if he needs more assistance." After telling the story, Jesus asked which the men was a neighbor to the beaten and injured man, and a listener had said, "The one who had compassion, who helped him." And the 5 words that are probably the most important of all in this were Jesus' final words in that story. Go and do the same. We don't have to be the same and to love one another. In fact, God delights in the diversity that he created. Why else would he have made us so wonderfully mixed up, unique, and yes, very different? And in closing, it is that very diversity in humanity that makes us and can make us better together.